Welcome to the Monsignor Farrell High School Study Skills Seminar. If you're watching these videos, chances are you're an incoming freshman, but they're just as useful for upperclassmen as a refresher for the skills that you need to succeed in high school or in college. These skills are also applicable and useful when you get out of college into your work life. These are not the most exciting videos you've ever seen in your life, but they may be the most helpful. They will give you the skills and tools you need to succeed in all of your courses. Now, we can only do a brief overview in this video of some of the skills that you might find helpful. Your teachers in your classes will do a much better job of explaining them in detail and showing you how to apply them in their individual subjects. But we hope that this will give you a bit of a jump start as you begin your life here at Monsignor Farrell High School. If you're viewing this, there's a good chance that you're an incoming freshman. Welcome to high school. It's a very different world from 8th grade. Let's point out, you are no longer a boy, but a young man. A vir fidelis, we say at Monsignor Farrell, a faithful man, but that term can just as well be translated from the Latin as a responsible hero. So go ahead and live that way. If you're waiting for life to start, I have news for you. There are no dress rehearsals for life. It's already begun. So if you want to live as a vir fidelis, if you want to live out those values, if you want to be admired as a true Farrell man, now's the time to start. Take it upon yourself and be proud that you've been chosen to be part of this community. In high school, you are your own man. That is, you're responsible for yourself and man enough to take your education on. Being a high school student is a job, a profession. It is not your parents' job. It is not your grandparents' job. It's not your older brother's job or your younger sister's. It's on you. Only you can absorb your education. Only you can play the game, work out your body, and work out your mind. Just as you wouldn't expect somebody else to play for you on the baseball team, the hockey team, the football team, just as you wouldn't expect somebody else to appear for you in our plays or play your instrument in the band, so you can't expect your teachers or parents to take responsibility for your education. You have to learn to manage it yourself, to motivate yourself to get the job done. You're a professional student. Being a scholar, and all students are scholars, that's what the word means. Being a scholar is your job, your profession, your craft. And just like any other job or profession or craft, it requires time, practice, work, effort to perfect the skills to make you an expert at it. It's possible that the most valuable thing you learn in high school is not the chemistry or the Spanish or the calculus that you'll take. It's the skills to be able to manage your own learning. If you're a smart guy, you're never going to stop learning throughout your career, throughout your life. You're never going to stop having to take notes, to read manuals, books, to keep up on your profession, to think critically and carefully, to express yourself. All of those skills which run across the curriculum. Doesn't matter what subject you're taking, and doesn't matter what job you do, all of them will be useful to you living your life as a vir fidelis. So what we're going to talk about are the following items. We're going to teach you the most effective, most useful techniques used by the best students in the most challenging courses. How to read a book. You think you've been reading all this time? We have news for you. You haven't learned how to read yet. How to take notes. We're going to teach you the Cornell method for doing this. How to manage your time, a technique called the Pomodoro method. some tricks for how to memorize. In a lot of your courses, whether you take Latin or Spanish or Italian, whether you're taking biology or chemistry, you're going to have to memorize. And an introduction to a little bit of how to write. You'll be writing in a lot of your courses, and of course your teachers in your English classes and your history classes will be going into much greater detail with much greater expertise. But we want to give you a little bit of a heads up for how to start to think about organizing good, effective writing. But first, let's talk about a few practical, physical matters. Set and setting. Set and setting are your attitude, the place where you work, and the time you choose to work. If you want to be an effective student, you have to put aside the time, you have to have a proper place, a kind of workshop prepared, and you have to approach it with the correct attitude. Your set, that is your mindset, your attitude, should include, first of all, a sense of responsibility. Again, this is your job. You need to take responsibility for yourself. Second, desire. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You may have heard that expression. I can show you fascinating facts. I can point you to good books. I can give you ideas about how to apply your skills. But if you don't want to do the work, you're never going to learn. If you do not have a desire to be a well-educated man and to be a vir fidelis, frankly, Farrell is the wrong place for you. This is a community of guys who are serious about living lives of solid values and making the most of the skills they have. That's desire. Now, even the best Farrell men will have their favorite subjects and their least favorite subjects. You may love science and not be so hot on history. You may enjoy English literature and really hate math. That's okay. You know, as a responsible hero, as a vir fidelis, that you have to have at least the desire to do well, at least the desire to do a good job at your job. Whatever job you have, even if you get your dream job in life, there are going to be parts of it and aspects of it that are not going to be your favorite thing. You have to do those parts just as well as you do the parts you love. The parts you love are easy. The parts you hate, well, that's where you show your character. You get them done with the same sense of responsibility. Magis. Magis is a great word. It's a Latin word, and it means more. Your general attitude should be not how little can I do and get away with it, but how much more can I accomplish? That doesn't mean obsessing about numbers or grades, beating yourself up because you only got a 98 on the test and not 100. It's about how much more can I accomplish with the skills I have. It's the desire to do a little bit better, to make a little more of what you've been given. So, you know, some of you are athletes. One of the things you might admire about the track team guys is their attitude toward PRs, personal records. They're always trying to do just a little bit better. Can I shave another couple of seconds off my time? Can I jump another couple of inches higher over the bar? By stretching yourself that way, you understand you can accomplish more than you ever thought. Magis is about not sliding by with the minimum amount of work to accomplish a minimum level of skill and get by with merely passing. It's also, understand, not the attitude that you have to get 100 in everything, and if you don't, you need to beat yourself up because you're worthless. No. It's about taking what you have and saying, have I made a little more of what I have today than I did yesterday? Can I understand things a little more deeply? Can I challenge myself a little more? This is also going to require self-discipline. The hard stuff requires you to get it done. The easy stuff, well, that you're going to look forward to. the book you like to read, or the experiments in biology you enjoy doing. You're going to do great at that because you're already set to go. It's sitting down and getting that history homework done when you're not a big history fan. That's where the man is separated from the boy. And a man, a vir fidelis, a responsible hero, a faithful man, gets the job done and, forces himself to do it even when he doesn't want to. He gets himself to school on time, in proper uniform, looking sharp. He keeps his attention going in every class, even the classes he might find boring. He forces himself to pay attention and do his best. That's self-discipline. Okay, that's set as in mindset. Let's talk about setting for a minute. Setting is place and time. In order to do this profession of scholar, you need to have a place to do it, physically. You should have somewhere a dedicated spot for your study. Ideally, it should be a desk in your room, or maybe a spot, a corner of another room in your house. If you've got a finished basement or some family room that you can set aside a part of it. The point of it is to be your study place. Our brains work in gestures and images and symbols. Yeah? You know when you walk into a church, it is a place of prayer. You can pray anywhere. You know that. God is everywhere, always listening. You can do it while you're walking down the street. But we have these places called churches or synagogues or mosques, depending on your religious tradition, that we decorate, that we build with a certain architecture to remind us and get ourselves psychologically set for what's going to happen there. If you walk into a sports stadium, it's sure not a church. It's not just a practical thing of, well, you need a field of a certain size, but there's a whole architecture around it that puts you in the mindset of getting ready for cheering for an exciting game. Same thing is true for study. If you have a spot that you use for study and pretty much only for study and always for study, then when you sit down at, let's say, that desk, your brain starts to shift gears. You start to go into the, okay, now it's time for school. Some of you may have experienced this already in this COVID era that we're just coming out of. You know that if you've had to have virtual school, it helps a lot to have a place that's set aside just for that. It helps you to stay focused. So, ideally, a spot, something like a desk, a table that you use for study and pretty much only for study. Tools all available there. You should have your pens, pencils, protractors, calculators, highlighters, your textbooks, all of that lined up there so that you're not giving yourself an excuse to take 20 minutes to go hunting for a pen because you need one and you forgot, and really you're distracting yourself. Have everything there ready to go. Tools just like a workbench. And a place that is distraction-free. Distraction-free means a minimum of electronic devices. Multitasking is a myth and a lie. The human brain does not multitask. If you've been told that, you've been told wrongly. The science is that your brain can do one thing at a time. Now, some people can do one thing at a time all in a row, so they focus first on task A, and then on task B, and then on task C, and back to task A. But they're only focusing on one thing at a time. If you are trying to listen to your music and binge watch something on your computer and instant message your friends or text them, and play a video game while you're trying to do your history homework, I guarantee you, you will do none of the above well, least of all your history homework. Part of the self-discipline is to shut everything else off. Put it all away. Focus only on the task at hand. That's what you need to do. Time, also part of your setting. Know thyself and know thine enemy. That was the advice given in ancient Greece by the oracle at Delphi. And the trick of it was, you know who your enemy is? It's yourself. When it comes to time management, we are our own worst enemies. We procrastinate. Procrastinate comes from two Latin words, pro, meaning for or until, and cras, meaning tomorrow. Procrastination is always putting off till tomorrow, or an hour from now, or a week from now, what you need to get done. You also know, on the other hand, that you have kind of natural rhythms to your day. There are times when you are all set and ready to go. Some guys are morning persons, right? They get up and they get to school and they're all full of energy that first period. Other guys, they take a while to kind of get rolling. But by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's their sharp time. Other guys, they get home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The first thing they need to do is take a nap. All of that's actually okay. We are built in different ways, and you got different bodies and brains. You can't let it be an excuse, but you do have to respect it and work around it. What does that mean? First, be realistic. You cannot expect to succeed if you are studying once a week or doing your homework just the day before a test. You have to be consistent, day to day. Consistent daily effort is the key to success. Putting in time each and every day on every subject. But you have to be realistic. If you know you are the kind of guy who needs to get the work done and out of the way, great. The minute you walk in the door when you get home at 3 o'clock or 3:30, you sit down, you focus, you get the job done. And you're all done by dinner time. Terrific. On the other hand, if you're the kind of guy who knows that you will pass out if you try to do that, fine. Go and take a nap. Nothing wrong with it. You guys are still growing as fast as a toddler at your age, and that can wear you out. So you go, you take a half-hour snooze, set your alarm. Don't take too much more than that, because then you're going to be groggy. But 20 minutes, half an hour, sometimes that will be a nice refreshment. And then, 4 o'clock, you're all set to go, yeah? Some of you need to move, physically. You get home, you've been sitting in school all day, great. Take the dog out for a walk. Go for a run yourself, yeah? Get it out of your system. Give yourself a half an hour, 45 minutes, stretch, use the body a little bit, and then you know you're ready to settle down. Don't let any of that become an excuse to do nothing until about 11:30 at night. But also don't try to force yourself. If you are truly worn out and tired, you may need to give yourself a little bit of a break before you start studying. Now, why would you be worn out and tired? This is also a very key thing to know. Despite what everybody thinks, you need 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. There are guys who survive on 3 hours of sleep a night. They're surviving. They're not thriving. If you get less than about 8 hours of sleep a night consistently, your brain starts to get weak. It is slow. It has trouble remembering. Tired brains don't work well. So guys think they're getting by. They're not. You really need to discipline yourself about that as well. You need to get to bed at a reasonable hour. You can't have your phone on and be texting your friends at 4 o'clock in the morning, because if you're going to get to school on time, you're going to wind up getting, 2.5 hours of sleep a night. This is no good for you in the long run. Not as a student, not as an athlete, not as a healthy person. Okay, once you've got your attitude set, your place set, you know your time, you know your rhythm, and you're committed to consistent daily effort, you also need to be realistic, let me point out, about the time it will take you to study. If you've got 20 pages to read for history, you can't say, oh, I'll get that done in 10 minutes. Nope. If you've got a big test coming up, oh, I'll study. Now, let's talk about note-taking next. I'm going to teach you now, briefly, the Cornell method of note-taking. It's going to be very useful for you in class. It is also going to be useful for you as you read. The Cornell method of note-taking is extremely effective. You use it to take notes from texts and textbooks that you may read, notes from lectures, notes from discussions in class, and they produce very useful notes for study later. The principles involved are a thing called SQ3R applied to notes. SQ3R stands for survey, question, read, recite, review. We're going to talk about that more in detail when we talk about how to read a book. But for now, let's just talk about the Cornell notes. So, this is a look at how Cornell notes are set up, just to give you an overview before we really get started here. Cornell notes were named for Cornell University, Ivy League school, upstate New York, and they were developed quite a while ago for students in the Ivy Leagues. In other words, what do we know? This has been around for quite a long time, 1950s. It was developed by educational professionals and psychologists to figure out what works best for the human brain. And it was also meant for kids in the most challenging courses in the most challenging universities. It works. It's efficient. It takes a little more effort than you might be used to in taking notes, but if you put the effort in at the front end, you get big benefits at the other end. It's highly effective. It gives you 3 sections of notes. Over on the left side, here you've got keywords, questions, and main ideas. Here you have details, examples, definitions. And down at the bottom, you're going to have summaries. Good for science, for history, for literature, for anything else, and requires only real or virtual paper and the ability to draw a line. There are notebooks out there that you can find that are built this way. The Cornell style of note-taking, sometimes called focus notes. You find notebooks that are actually published that are laid out this way already. You don't need them. Any piece of paper, any notebook, or you can even do it using, if I can pull it up here, templates on Microsoft Word. You can find these things. So, but all you need to do is take a notebook, draw a line down the side, draw a line across the top, and most notebooks have, space up the top anyway, and draw a line across the bottom. We'll see why you need that in just a second. Let me also offer you a very important idea. Take notes by hand. Taking notes online does not work well. I know that you are used to using laptops, you've got computers, etc. And there's all kinds of programs on there, OneNote and stuff. As a teacher who has been doing this a long time, I will tell you, I have seen it, I have experimented with it. Students who take notes by typing them into the computer retain a tenth of what kids who write them out by hand retain. This is because of how our brains work. The more parts of your brain you get to light up, the better. If you take notes by hand, you're using your eyes to watch the teacher or read the book, you're listening with your ears, and you are moving your whole arm. You are also summarizing what's being said or what you're reading to create those notes. If you are taking notes online, chances are you're simply taking dictation, and it's going in your ear and out your fingers and onto the screen. People who take notes, for instance, in court stenographers, they sit there and they type in the transcript of what's being said by the lawyers, will tell you when the case is over, they can't remember anything that happened because they're not thinking as they're doing it. They've learned to automatically just, it goes in the ear, the words go in the ear, and out it comes on the screen. If you take notes by hand, you're much better off, so I strongly encourage you to do that. Okay, so let's take a look at this Cornell method of note-taking. Okay, so this is another diagram, same idea. Up at the top, up here, you would generally put a title so that you know what date you took these notes and what the general topic of the class or the lecture or of the chapter of the book is. In this column, as you listen to the lecture or read, first you record. You take notes using bullet points, writing down key words the teacher may use, writing down key ideas, outlining as you go. You can't expect the teacher to dictate any more than you can expect the book to dictate to you. Whether you're reading or listening to the teacher, you're listening for what you consider to be the key ideas, vocabulary that you pick up that you're going to need to know, the key statistics, the key facts, and you record them here, as I said, in a sort of bullet point format. Second, after the lecture or after you read the textbook, you then write questions. Over here in the Q column, it's called. As you read through the notes, first of all, you correct the notes. So now you've gone home for the day. You go back over your notes and you say, oh, I'm never going to remember what that means. Let me put in an extra note now. Or, no, wait a minute, I wrote that wrong. That's not what he said, and you fix it. Yeah? You also write over here questions based on these notes. You think about what's the key point here, and you write it in the side. Why? Because later, when you need to, quote, study, how do you study? We call study recitation. That's a technical word. You may not have used it this way before. Recitation is simply repeating what you've learned. So you cover this column with a piece of paper or your hand, you look at these key questions over here, and you see if you can answer them. Look at the question, try to answer it, and then look at the notes and see how you did. And if you didn't do so hot, you know you need to study that. Reflect. You reflect on the material, asking yourself, what's the significance of this? What's the bottom line here? What's the big takeaway? What's the punchline? What's the theme? What principle are these based on? How do I apply them? There, you can add extra Q questions, particularly toward the bottom, that sort of brings you into a summary. It's also going to give you an idea of what to put at the bottom of the page, a summary of what is here. So that when you go back to study at the end of the semester or the end of the year, and you're doing, I don't know, a history course, and it comes up, this course, all year we did a thing on Rome and Greece, Roman history. Where is that? you can flip through the book, look at the summaries, and find what you need. You've got the facts, you've got some questions about the big takeaways and ideas, the sorts of things that might be, say, an essay question, and it's all there to study from. Does this take extra work while you're making it? Yup. Does it take extra work that night as you're reviewing it and writing up those questions? Yup. But if you do it then when you get to that midterm exam or that final exam, you're in much, much better shape. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to use this template here. It's not something you have to use. I'm just going to use it to make it a little easier for you to see. And I'm going to type it. As I said, normally the best thing is to write it out by hand. Believe me, trust me. I'm going to type it simply because my handwriting's pretty bad and it will be easier for you to read. Now, at the top of the page here, you can put your name, you can put your class, you can put all of that. At least, good idea is to put a topic. So let's say you're taking United States history, and you're doing a class on the causes of the Civil War. All right, there's your topic. And let's say the date is January 15th. Okay. Always good to put the date in so that if stuff ever gets out of order or you're trying to remember when something happened or when the teacher talked about it, you can find it. This is often a useful thing to have. You should know what class period you're taking a class, so there we go. Okay. So let's say you're in my class and I'm teaching U.S. history, which I do, AP U.S. history, and you're doing a class on the causes of the Civil War. All right. And I say to you, well, in the 1840s and 50s, the North and the South were going in different directions economically. The northern states were becoming far more industrialized and were benefiting from a lot of immigration, which was coming to work in the new factories, and therefore they had a large pool of workers. The South stayed agricultural. Their economy was almost entirely based on cotton production, very rural, and very little immigration going to the South. They are entirely dependent on a slave economy. Stop. Okay, you've just been listening to me lecture the class and talking about cause of the Civil War. You should have been writing here, all right, so North and South, whoops, different economies. North, industrial. Oh, put it in here. Whoops, I can't make it do this. Wham. Immigration. Labor force. You might put in here new factories. Draw immigrants. And based on immigrant labor. And based on what I've just been saying to you, you might also say South, agricultural, and you might say all about cotton, totally dependent on slave labor. Okay. And this is just, 1 second, 1 minute there of lecture. And you got this notes here. Got it? Okay. Now, later on, you go home. And obviously, a 40-minute class, you'd have a lot more notes. Okay. Now, later on, you go home. Yeah? And that evening, you go over this and you say, okay, let's see what's going on here. North and South, different economies. North industrial. Okay. Immigration, labor force, and you realize, I'm not going to remember why that's important. So let me put in now, didn't need slave labor because they had immigrants. Okay, now I'll remember why that's important later on. New factories draw immigrants and based on immigrant labor. They needed the immigrants. Okay, I got it. South is agricultural. Now, you guys are smart. You know what agricultural means, but let's say it's a new word for you. Oh, I'll never remember. I'll put in, that means farming. Whoops, and I got to spell it right. So I'll fix the spelling. All about cotton, right, which is grown on the farms. Okay, so now I've fixed this. I've reviewed it. Now I look over here. Now, what do I want to say? Give me a question that kind of reviews all of this. How were North and South economies different? Okay, great. Now when I go back 6 months from now, I'm getting ready for the final, I want to review all this, I can cover up this half, say, all right, how were the North and South economies different? Let me try to remember. You recite it to yourself, and then you look and say, was I right? Yep. Oh, I got all the points. Good, I know what I'm talking about. Now, down at the bottom, you might, and this is only a little piece of this lecture, of course, so we don't really have a full summary here, but what might you put down here? North and South, whoops, it's going to be a little hard. Going in different economic directions, different labor sources. Whoops. My typing is bad, guys. Okay. So now I've got at the bottom of the page this summary. So if I'm looking for, oh boy, I got to study the Civil War stuff. Let me see. What am I looking for? I'm looking for reason, what we call in history, sectionalism. What are the differences between the different sections of the country? And I'm looking, I can flip through the summary and find, there we go. Okay, there's something there. Now let me look at the page and see what I'm talking about, yeah? So this is the Cornell system of taking notes. Now, let's talk about how you would take notes from a book. And this requires you to think about how you read. This is a page from a textbook, typical freshman global studies textbook, and the chapter, this is Chapter 6 up here, on Rome, the Roman Republic. Okay, so you're faced with reading this textbook, and the question is, how do you take notes on this? Well, watch. When you read a book for school, and this is mostly applied to non-fiction books, so if you're reading a novel or a short story, that's a bit different. But if you're reading a book for school, the SQ3R method was developed also at about the same time as the Cornell notes, 1950s, and was developed again by professional psychologists and very experienced teachers to help students in Ivy League universities get through their reading effectively. Survey, question, read, recite, review. This is why SQ3R. Survey. You gather the information necessary to focus and formulate goals. Question. You help your mind engage and concentrate. Read. You read and fill in the information around the mental structures you've been building. Recite. Train your mind to concentrate and learn as it reads. And you review. Refine your mental organization and begin building memory. Now, what on God's green earth does that mean? Survey. First, you take a look at the lay of the land of what you're about to read. You look through whatever that reading is going to be, and you begin to get an idea of what it's about and what you should be looking for. The key to SQ3R is hunting for answers to questions. With your textbooks, it will be relatively easy because they're set up to do this. You've got headings here. The Roman Republic, rise of civilization, Roman civilization, the Italian Peninsula, early settlements in Italy, We go through some of the pages. Plebeians demand equality, lasting legacy, etc. Okay. We have here a question. How did the Roman Republic influence the U.S. Constitution? Interesting. Roman society, role of women. Okay. Roman education, Roman mythology. Another question. Identify what social rights did women have in the Republic? All right, interesting. And we got a map up here, lots of colors, and look at this, different time periods, different colors. Territory gained from Carthage. All right, so Carthage is a place. And Hannibal's invasion route. Well, look at that. All right. Now, great. So what? We've just gotten an overview. We've surveyed what's in front of us. So we know the topic is going to be about the Roman Republic. Roman civilization is going to become dominant. We know a bit about where it's going to be, all right. Roman society seems to be important. Women seem to be an important topic here, huh? And there's a relationship between Rome and the U.S. Constitution. Oops. Okay, now we look at the front page again. We also see we have a bunch of key terms here. Etruscans, Republic, Patrician, Consul. So we have a list of vocabulary words and objectives. Well, let's look at those objectives for a minute. Now, if I pull those up, it says, objectives, as the objectives of reading the chapter. Describe the development of the classical civilization of Rome. Outline how the Roman Republic was structured and governed. Understand the rights and religious practices characterized Roman society. Explain how the Roman Republic grew and used its political influence. Okay, now, I haven't read this chapter yet. I've just surveyed it. That's the S. So let me see where I'm going with this and get an idea. Second is the Q, question. You might even write down in that question column in your notebook the objectives. How did the classical civilization of Rome develop? There's a good key question to put at the top of the page, because that's a big one, right? How was the Roman Republic structured and governed? You might put that down the side. The key terms. Who were the Etruscans? You might start off with, what is a republic? Well, it might help you. Or what does a republic mean with regard to Rome? Yeah? And you might write those down the side too. As you read, now, you're looking for the answers to those questions. And you take notes in your Cornell method of notes, turning these headings into questions and using them to outline the notes. So you put it top there. Rise of Roman civilization. Italy is a peninsula that looks like a boot jutting into the Mediterranean and kicking the island of Sicily toward Africa. All right, great. Good to know. Italy, peninsula. So you write down in your notebook, Italy, arrow, peninsula. What's a peninsula? Well, you might know. Peninsula actually means almost an island in Latin. That's what it really means. It's a piece of land surrounded by water on three sides, like Florida, rather than an island that's surrounded all the way around. I'm sure you guys know that. If you didn't know that, you see that word, don't just blip over it. Look it up. That's how you expand your vocabulary, and that's how you take your notes. And you organize your notes. Italian peninsula, there we go. Early settlements in Italy. What do? The Italian peninsula, because of its geography, Italy proved much easier to unify than Greece. Unlike Greece, Italy is not broken up into small isolated valleys. In addition, the Apennine Mountains, which run down the length of the Italian peninsula, are less rugged than the mountains of Greece. Finally, Italy has broad, fertile plains in the north and the west. These plains supported the growing population. So here's a question. You've now read this paragraph. So, you surveyed, you questioned, you've read. Now you recite, meaning what? You look at that paragraph again and say, what is the idea or two ideas I need to take away from this paragraph? What is it I should remember? Italy, much more unified than Greece. Italy, fertile plains that fed its population. Those are the two ideas to take away from this paragraph. Could I cover this paragraph and recite, why is the peninsula of Italy important? Because it was more unified than Greece, and it was fertile enough to support the population. Okay, so you write that in your notes. Great. Here you've got a question set up for you. How did the Roman Republic influence the Constitution? Don't skip it. Read it. And then say, can I answer that question? And if you can't, that question's there for a reason. I better go back and check and find the answer if I don't know it, because then I didn't read carefully enough. More than 2,000 years later, the framers of the Constitution would adapt such Roman ideas as the Senate, the veto, and the system of checks and balances. Okay, there's a summary. Do I know what the veto is? Do I know what the Senate is? Clearly this assumes I do. They must have told me about it. I better go back and reread if I'm not sure what veto means. Oh, let's see. Oh, the tribunes could veto or block laws that they felt harmful to the plebeians. Okay, so that's what veto means. You see, and this is how you take notes as you read. If you just push your eyes across the page, you get very little out of it. Now, let's look at this. This is a different kind of book. This is actually the book I assign for summer reading. If you're taking the Latin course, this would be a typical book you'd have to read. And for many of your other courses, whatever your courses are, you'll have books like this to read. Okay, this is not a textbook. This is a scholar's book. This happens to be written about Roman civilization. It's not going to pre-organize for you a list of vocabulary. It's not going to have summaries or headings in there that do all the work for you in taking notes. So you have to take notes on it like you take notes on a lecture. You have to pay attention, think about what's being said, and then summarize it for yourself. So we look at this and it says, I found Rome a city of brick and left it one of marble, boasted Augustus, and his successors carried on in the same spirit. Well, if you don't know who Augustus is, Roman emperor, you look him up and you write down Augustus, Roman emperor. And you might write down that quote because it's a really cute quote. In the center, the broad hollow, more or less ringed by the 7 hills, the emperors raised or rebuilt structures whose remains have drawn tourists for centuries. The Forum, or public square, surrounded by the Hall of Records, the Senate House, the law courts, the temples, the new forums connected with it, and more law courts and temples, as well as colonnades for leisurely strolling. The impressive imperial palaces that crown the hill flanking it, the vast public baths. Okay, am I going to make a note on that? Sure. In the center, arrow, emperors raised or rebuilt structure. So you're going to write in center, the Forum, public square. And you might write down some of the things around it. If you're a smart guy, you notice. Hall of Records, Senate House, law courts. So government buildings, temples, religious buildings, more courts and temples, colonnades for leisurely strolling. So sort of public recreation, parks. So you might have already written Forum, you might have written center of Rome, Forum, public square, government buildings, religious buildings, recreation. Palaces, the vast public baths. Sumptuousness was the keynote, also on the upper slopes and crowns of some of the hills, the Quirinal and Chailey and Aventine, the residential quarters favored by the rich. There was even a rural note on the Esquiline Hill in the Pincian, where a few great potentates lived in mansions surrounded by spacious gardens. Okay, a potentate, we might want to find out what that means. Potentate comes from the Latin word for powerful. So the powerful, the politically powerful usually, lived in great mansions surrounded by spacious gardens. All right, so what's the takeaway from that? You make a little note in your Cornell notes that up on the hills were the rich district, okay? The rich people lived on the hills. However, the moment one left these gilded neighborhoods and moved back toward town center, along the depressions between the hills, the city of brick was still very much in evidence. Here were the middle and lower class quarters, marked by block after block of apartment houses, packed cheek by jowl to fill every available foot of space. Shops lined the street, and above them rose 3, 4, sometimes even more stories of flats. Flats here being apartments. Okay, so what do we write about here? So the lower down on the hills you lived, the poorer you were, and you likely lived in an apartment house rather than had your own palace. Now, what's the takeaway from that whole first paragraph? Rome was a city of marble and of brick. Marble symbolizing the great wealth of Rome, which was in its big public buildings and up on the tops of the hills where the rich lived, and brick symbolizing its more humble buildings at the bottom of the hills where the poor lived. And there's your summary for that first part. And so you can do that through the entire chapter, yeah? And this is how you take notes as you go. Constantly thinking about what's the overarching theme here? What's the big takeaway? Okay, so that's a little bit about how to read a book and how to take notes on a book or a lecture. Again, the SQ3R, survey. Survey or skim by going through the chapter and noting headings, subheadings, figures, tables. Create a roadmap or outline for reading. That should take you 3 to 5 minutes in a chapter. Now, question. Generate questions about the reading. What is this chapter about? What question is this chapter trying to answer? Convert headings and subheadings into questions. Use review questions that are in the textbook. We saw some of those, yeah? You look for answers in the content of the text. That should take you another 3 to 5 minutes. Then you actually read. You read the chapter or read the particular reading in the textbook. Using the roadmap or outline you now have and questions you formulated, you read actively, hunting for the answers. Recite. Using your own words as you go along, try to teach another person what you just learned from memory. Think of it that way. The best way to learn something is to try to teach it to another. So if you can teach that chapter to your friend, to your dog, to the mirror in your room, it doesn't matter. You know the chapter. And if you can't, then you don't know it. And finally, review. Go back to your original big questions up at the top and review what you've learned. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a couple of other quick items. The Pomodoro technique. This is a method for managing your time. The Pomodoro technique is again developed by psychiatrists and psychologists, neurologists, teachers. It works very well. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and it is named that because of this gadget, which was a kitchen timer in the shape of a tomato, which is how the first psychologist who developed this started out timing. Pomodoro, you need to do something. You need to do some work for school, some studying. You sit down and you set a timer for 25 minutes. The ritual of setting the timer, physically setting it up, actually helps you get into the right psychological space. You study or write, research, read, whatever it is you need to do, for the full 25 minutes. You give yourself a 25-minute chunk to work, and you discipline yourself to do it. You finish early, you use the extra time to review what you've done, check your notes. Not done, you put a check mark on a pad of scrap paper. You take a 5-minute break, not 3 hours, 5 minutes. You get up, you walk around, you stretch. And then, after 5 full minutes, you sit down, you reset the timer, you do it again. When you have 4 check marks, that is, you've been through 2 hours of study, and let's assume it's for a big test or a final, you set the timer again, this time for a 25-minute break. Not 5 minutes, but a good half hour. And you go, you take a walk, you stretch, and you repeat until you get the work done. Believe it or not, it works. If you have homework to do and you bust it up into 25-minute segments, you will work efficiently. And you've got something to look forward to. You get that little 5-minute break until you kind of climb the rungs of this ladder to get the work done. If you try to sit and study for 3 solid hours, let's say, you wind up losing it. You can't concentrate for that long. You will wind up giving yourself a break, and the break will become 5 hours and you'll never finish. The Pomodoro technique, this 25-minute segments, works. Let's talk about memorization. Memorization. The key to memorization is repetition. More often is more important than more time. More often is more important than more time. Sitting and trying to memorize something for 3 hours. You take a list of vocabulary words and try to do it for 3 hours. It does not work. Your brain can't do it. On the other hand, if you make physical flashcards, again, the act of writing them out with your hand on index cards, vocabulary word on one side, definition on the other, or fact on one side and its importance on the other, whatever you have to memorize. You put them in your pocket and you carry them with you. The act of making those flashcards makes you think through the material. You will remember it just from doing that. Now that you have the flashcards in your pocket, you pull them out whenever you get a few free moments, 5 or 10 minutes at a time. You're waiting for the bus, you're waiting for lunch, you got a couple of minutes in the evening, you're sitting around waiting for dinner. You pull them out and you go over that material, that vocabulary list, whatever it is, for 5 or 10 minutes. If you take every opportunity to do that 5 or 6 times a day, but 5 minutes at a time, you'll have studied for half an hour or even an hour. But because it's broken up in little pieces, it doesn't feel like it. And because it's broken up in little pieces, over the course of the day, you will remember it a lot faster than if you just sat down for an hour and went over and over and over as a solid thing. To memorize for understanding, that is, you're not just memorizing a list, but you're trying to remember concepts, use that recite portion of the Cornell SQ3R technique. Cover the answers to the key questions, go through those key questions, do your best to answer them, then check your notes. Repetition, of course, matters there too. Okay, so I hope you got something out of this. I hope you'll find this helpful going forward. Good luck to you. And once more, as with anything else, practicing, self-discipline, consistent daily effort They're the keys to using these skills in the most effective way possible.